Hello, my name is Marion Morrison, and I'm glad to be with you today as the Executive Director of Friends of a Legacy, or FOAL. We have been asked to be part of the FREES Summit to tell you a little bit about our organization, how we got started, and how we got to where we are today. There is no better person to tell this story than Marshall Dominic. He's one of the founding board members and a current board member of the organization. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Marshall Dominic.
Good day to you, and thank you for your interest in FOAL, Friends of a Legacy, the McCullough Peaks Mustangs. I've been asked to try to communicate with you today about our advocacy group for the wild horses in the Cody area, the McCullough Peaks Mustangs. First of all, I would tell you that I am one of 4 people that helped to found the organization back in 2005. My wife Betty Dominic, and another very strong advocate, Ada Embody, and a fellow named Ken Martin, who was guiding commercial tours of the Mustangs, of the McCullough Peaks wild horses, I should say. The 4 of us got together after Ken had asked my wife and I to go out and view the horses, because he was concerned that the BLM was, the Bureau of Land Management, if you will, BLM, was saying that the wild horses in our herd management area at the McCullough Peaks outside of Cody to the east of us, that those horses were in bad shape. That was one of the rationales for removing so many horses. Indeed, when we went with Ken to look at those horses back in 2004, we discovered that for the most part, those horses were in great shape. There were some obviously older horses that were looking poor and ribby, but for the most part, generally speaking, the horses were in good shape. However, they were over the appropriate management level, or AML, as set by the BLM, and that for this particular herd area, that management level was set back in the early 80s, I believe, at 70 to 140 horses. Well, they were planning to do a gather, also known as a roundup, of those horses, and subsequently removed over 300 head of horses from the herd management area. That got us to thinking that maybe there was something that we could do to help manage the horses in our local area. So those 4 people, Ada Embody, Ken Martin, Betty Dominic, and myself, had a short meeting in April of 2005 and said, let's organize a group of people and see if we can work with the BLM. We decided at the outset that we would try to work within the scope of the current rules and regulations and try to work not in an adversarial way, but in a cooperative way with the BLM. That was one of our initial goals. We enlisted the help of another local group, the Pryor Mountain Wild Mustang Association over in Lovell. They had been organized 10 years prior to our organization, and they had a 501c3, and we're finding some success in working with the BLM. They helped us by giving us a copy of their 501c3 application, and we set to work applying for that piece of paper that you must have to operate as a nonprofit. So we got help initially right from another group. We also got help from the Wildlife Land Trust. They were operating as an offshoot of the Humane Society of the United States, and they had an interest in securing portions of land which are important to the habitat of wildlife throughout the West. Or actually throughout the United States, but their focus at that time happened to be in the West, and they helped us to secure a portion of land that's adjacent to our herd management area, with the thought that we could develop an interpretive center on that piece of property, and perhaps do other things with it, which I'll go into in a few minutes. They helped us to secure some funds to purchase 160 acres, which is adjacent to the herd management area. We also were very fortunate in enlisting the help of a major donor. Her name, which I can give out now, that she is deceased, is Nancy Carol Draper, and Nancy did not want to be recognized. She wanted to be anonymous, but she gave us a significant amount of money to purchase that initial 160 acres. We set out to gather some help from other directors. We considered ourselves this core group of 4 considered ourselves the initial directors of the organization, but we enlisted the help of a number of other local people right away, and tried to get a diverse group of people who could give us time and volunteer their efforts in organizing the group. That was critical in securing an advocacy group locally that was interested in getting stuff done right here in this local area. And again, one of our goals from the get-go was to keep this local and keep it small enough or focused enough on this herd management area that we could be effective. Recognizing that if we tried to go national or expand our scope, we would probably have a lot of trouble being successful. So we thought initially that we might try to buy out some of the permits from the cattle grazers who were in somewhat competition with the wild horses on the herd management area. That didn't prove to be feasible for several reasons, which I don't need to go into. But we then decided that we should concentrate on management of the habitat, that is, trying to enhance the habitat for all the critters that live out there, not just the wild horses, but the other wildlife as well as the cattle. That we should partner with the BLM and the permittees, recognizing that they had a right to their permits and their cattle grazing, and that we should also have a third prong to our goal, and that would be education of the general public about the wild horses and the wild horse issues. So those are our three primary goals of how to protect and preserve the wild horses in the McCullough Peaks. We feel that we've been pretty successful. Early on, we started with water projects, and the first water project we did was a new well, which was drilled at a site where an existing well had failed. And it was, the existing well had been supplying water, but the well casing had failed. And so we collected enough money to help the BLM to drill a well, put a windmill on it, and put a holding tank for water, and then a large, about 1 acre exclosure downstream from the holding tank with another water tank that was built specifically for small animals and birds to come in. And that we did that with the intent of allowing the other wildlife, most importantly sage grouse, to come into this exclosure without being disturbed by cattle, horses, antelope that would be using the big stock tank near the windmill and the well for their water. We partnered with some other organizations, the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, the Shoshone Backcountry Horsemen, a group from the Cody High School called the Outdoor Club. They all helped us in building the exclosure, as did the BLM with some of their staff came out and helped us with that exclosure and the installation of the water tanks. FOAL had a big role in taking the lead on that project, as well as a second well that was put in with a windmill. We also partnered with Marathon Oil Company. Marathon came to us to explain that their wild their perennial water affluent from their Oregon Basin oil field, which feeds into Dry Creek and runs as a perennial stream through the wild horse herd management area, that might dry up in late August or early September or even earlier than that, because they were not releasing as much water from they were planning that they might not be releasing as much water from the oil field as they had in the past due to new air quality standards and water quality standards. So they came to us and explained that they would help to put in some sort of a shallow well water system that would then supply water to reservoirs in the herd management area. They partnered with the Wild Turkey Foundation to run some of the funding through that organization, as they were able to help out with the paperwork on this project. We also, of course, were working with the BLM to make sure that the paperwork was all proper, that the BLM would supply some of the pipeline, some of the materials for the exclosures, and so forth. So, subsequent to the approach to us from Marathon Oil, we were able to put in 2 shallow wells along the Dry Creek drainage and solar pumps with water lines out to 5 different reservoirs in the herd management area, thus providing water that was not available when the stream dried up in the late summer months. We have also done some partnership with our local weed and pest districts in Park County and Bighorn County. Those have been successful in trying to manage invasive species or invasive weeds out in the herd management area, specifically salt cedar and Russian olive. Cutting back on the number of Russian olives and salt cedar bushes, we have allowed for other plants to grow and use the water that they would otherwise absorb. We have also worked on reservoirs. I mentioned that the salt cedar and Russian olive like to get in those watering areas and suck up the water from the reservoirs, and we have helped to rehab or rehabilitate quite a number of reservoirs out there, and our ongoing goal is to concentrate on reservoirs that are specifically and strategically located within the herd management area in an effort to help distribute the grazing, not only of the wild horses, but the cattle, so that they will cover more of the range and thus improve the range by not being located just where the existing water sources are. I mentioned that we have concentrated on education, and we've presented programs for grade school children in this local area. We have presented programs to the Rotary Club, to Chambers of Commerce in Cody and Powell, and we have also been successful in setting up an interpretive center on our 160 acres. It's a very well-displayed kiosk that explains some of the ins and outs of the wild horse management, and also talks about the habitat and other creatures that live out there. And prior to establishing that kiosk, we put in an interpretive trail with the help of Northwest College students who helped us develop the signs that are on that interpretive trail on our 160 acres. It's about a half a mile long each way, so a round trip of about a mile, a little less, to go on that interpretive trail and learn about the geology, the history, the Native Americans who lived there prior to our being here, the wild horses, and other wildlife that lives out here in the McCullough Peaks herd management area. We've also worked with the BLM on a fertile immunization program, PZP, or porcine zona pellucida, an inoculation that's given to the mares, which prevents them from producing a foal. And that, we feel, has been extremely successful. We partnered with the Science and Conservation Center in Billings, Montana. Dr. J. Kirkpatrick was instrumental in getting that center going and in the development of porcine zona pellucida, that PZP, which is used to inoculate the mares. And with his help and with the cooperation of the BLM, and especially with the help of Tricia Hatley, who is the wild horse specialist in the Cody Field office for the BLM, we were able to partner with the Science and Conservation Center and with the BLM and get a successful program going to control the number of foals that were born in the herd management area. And in essence, with that program and a concentration on that program, the number of horses has maintained a very stable figure in the herd management area. Since the last major gather, which I think was in 2009, and 97 horses were removed, the only other gather has been a bait trapping gather that removed 20 horses from the herd management area, and we haven't had to have a gather since that bait gather, which I think was 2015. Anyway, I'm hazy on the date, but we haven't had a bait gather, let's say, in the last 5 to 6 years. And we haven't had to have a major helicopter roundup or gather since 2009. The use of the PZP and the success in controlling the number of horses out there helps to reduce the stress on the horses and does not disrupt their social structure, which is, of course, a very important thing in the wild horse management. If you break down the family organization and social structure of the herd, that takes time to reestablish. I would like to kind of wrap this up with some information about what I feel has been our success in working as advocates for the wild horses. And I think that keeping our focus here on this particular herd has been advantageous. I think that our partnerships outside the BLM have been extremely important, and our working with the BLM in a non-adversarial role has been extremely important. There have been rocky times. I won't say that everything that we have done has worked out as we had planned or had hoped, but for the most part, the BLM has been cooperative, and we have tried to be cooperative with them And that's what gets things done. It isn't when you're trying to sue each other because you aren't doing it right. It's because we are trying to work toward similar goals or the same goal, and communicating about it. And when it isn't working, we try to figure out why it isn't working. And so I think those are the things that have helped us to be successful in achieving what we set out to do, to preserve and protect the wild horses of the McCullough Peaks. That pretty much says it all. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Marshall. As Marshall mentioned, FOAL has been supporting BLM's PZP program since 2011, darting an average of 62 mares per year. During this time, no helicopter and only one bait gather of 20 horses has been necessary. Due to a successful equine contraceptive program and natural attrition, a bait gather that is scheduled for 2021 may not be necessary. A rough calculation of the number of horses that have not ended up in long-term holding as a result of the PZP program in the McCullough Peaks is between 200 and 250 horses. Not only is the McCullough Peaks herd healthy and socially intact as a result, but if you take a look at the cost of off-range holding that is on the BLM's website of $1,000 per horse per year, you can see the significant savings this represents to the taxpayer. While we endeavor to educate the public about wild horses, to support BLM's PZP program, and to pursue projects that enhance the habitat of the McCullough Peaks, we preserve an historic legacy and national treasure with integrity for all to appreciate. Although it was never a goal of FOAL's, we hope that we can provide a template for others who treasure wildness and care about the Mustangs and the land upon which they live. Thank you for listening.